Hello, everybody, and welcome to International Podcast Day 2019. I am Dave Lee, co-founder of the International Celebration of the Power podcast. Make sure you guys are out there using hashtag International Podcast Day to celebrate and connect with all things podcasting related. Well, this hour we are joined by a very special guest from South Africa, Tayla Welch. And Tayla, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. It's quite late here. It's about 10 o'clock at night, but it's good.
But it's great. Yeah, I'm always glad to have South Africa represented. And during this next hour, you're going to be talking about balancing podcasting into your life. We do know that podcasting is definitely a passion project for most. And sometimes a lot of our passion projects take up a lot of time. So trying to find that work-life podcast balance is critically important. So we're going to get to that in just a second. But what I did want to mention real briefly is our sponsors for the 2019 International Podcast Day event. And without them, this event would not be possible, alongside all of our great, amazing 50 plus podcasters from 22 different countries that volunteer their time. That wouldn't be possible without them as well. Our platinum sponsor is Blueberry. They are a full-service podcasting company providing podcast hosting, stats, advertising opportunities, and much more. You can find more over at blueberry.com. And repurpose.io, they automatically convert your audio podcast into engaging videos and upload them to YouTube, Facebook, and various other social media channels. Try it for free over at repurpose.io/IPD. And Libsyn, another great gold sponsor, they're a podcast hosting, distribution, and monetization solution for audio and video podcasters around the world. Reach your audience everywhere and on the most popular audience destinations like Spotify and Pandora. Find more over at Libsyn.com. And of course, our streaming partner is StreamYard. Can't thank them enough for everything that they've done for us this year. And finally, our celebration supporters, great little support on the back end here with Second Line Themes, Geeks Rising Podcast Network, Synth, Outlier HQ, and Focusrite. So head over to internationalpodcastday.com/sponsors to grab some free items, some giveaways that our sponsors are doing. Of course, use some of those promo codes over there to get some of their discounted services as well. Well, Tayla, I appreciate you joining in. I'm really looking forward to balancing podcasting into your life. And thank you for contributing. And I'm glad that you're here.
No, thanks, Dave. It's good to be here. Thank you. Right. Okay. So before I actually get into balancing podcasting into your life, because for me, I find podcasting mainly a passion project of mine. It's not my day job, although I'm sure, like most of us, we'd love it to be, we'd love to earn some extra income about it, well, through it. And we'd love to kind of just do podcasting 24/7. So for me at the moment, it is definitely a passion project of mine. And it is about that balance. So a bit about me. I actually worked in radio in South Africa here. I worked on student radio stations, Tux FM. I was a presenter and a content producer there. Had loads of fun. It's kind of where I fell in love with, I guess you can say, audio creation. So yeah, that was loads of fun. Also, to be at a student radio station, I think is something you kind of need to experience in your life, whether it be, in the music department, as a presenter, anything like that. It's something you definitely need to experience if you're lucky enough to do so. So yeah, I guess you could say my podcasting or my audio journey started there in radio at Tux FM here in Pretoria, South Africa. And from there, I actually had to leave I had to leave radio. I'd finished my degree and other things as well had happened, and I needed to leave. So I left radio, and it was quite a sad day. Most of my radio colleagues that I kind of joined with also left around the same time. And it was quite a difficult thing to do, to leave something that was such a big part of your life. And now it's kind of like, man, you're in the real world. You have your degree, go and find a job and kind of forget about radio. So I guess that's what I did. I studied further. I'm actually a teacher now, so full-time teacher. And I'm also studying part-time as well. I'm doing my honors in psychology, which is also something I'm really, really passionate about. Hence my podcast based on psychology called Soul Search. I'll also get to that. So yeah, I had to find a job. Luckily for me, a couple of friends that I had at the time were also super passionate about radio still, and we still had this drive. We wanted to create something, we wanted to create something, and that's when podcasting came into the space for us, and for me as well. So what happened was we were all listening to these international podcasts. I think the first real one that hits, I think it's for most people as well, not just here in South Africa, but Criminal, I think. The first investigative type of podcast that you listen to, that really, got us all going, I wonder if we could do something like that, but in South Africa on that kind of scale. So a friend and I started a podcasting network, and that was going really well, and it was loads and loads of fun. However, there were lots of challenges. I think we also clashed in what the direction we wanted the network to go, and things like that. So eventually I decided that I was actually going to take my own ideas and create my own podcast. And I actually recommend that everyone does this. If you can, do it. Take something you are passionate about, take something that you are knowledgeable about, perhaps, and actually just press record. Now, when I first started podcasting, all I really had was my cell phone. Yeah, audio quality was not the best thing. So eventually I was able to buy a microphone and record from there. And for me, I felt that in the beginning, had a huge push towards quality. I was very absorbed with the quality that I wanted my podcast to have. So what I did with Soul Search, and I'll talk a bit more about what that podcast actually is, but what I did with it was I took it and I said, let me sit for a few months. Let me record interviews. Let me actually go and make it something that I can sit back and listen to and be proud of, and not feel like, oh, maybe I should remove that. Maybe I should remove that episode or something like that, which is kind of how I felt in the past with a few things that I'd uploaded with a friend of mine. Having said that, though, I learned so much being part of this makeshift podcast network at the time. It has grown since, though, and I'm really, really proud of that. But it was very, very new in South Africa. Podcasting still here is extremely new. We have two kind of streams of thoughts when it comes to podcasting. The first thing is your traditional podcast. Obviously, you record yourself, you record interviews, you edit it, you package it together, and you upload it onto wherever you host your podcasts. We have a great one here in South Africa called Iono FM, which works really, really well. And then you get audio archiving, which is when a radio station packages their shows that they've already broadcasted and puts it onto a podcast for listeners to listen to later, which is a great thing and it sounds really good. The problem with that, I feel, is radio is kind of created for in the now. Well, most radio stations. So when you're making a podcast and when you're packaging these episodes together, you got to kind of constantly think about, who is my audience? Is my audience someone who's going to be able to listen to this episode in a few weeks' time, a few months' time, that kind of thing. Quite funny, I know of a radio station here in South Africa that actually posts their traffic bulletins onto a podcast. So you can actually go back and listen. It's quite funny. You can go back and listen to, what was the traffic like on last week, Thursday at about 5:00? And you can actually hear, there was a broken down vehicle at this thing. It's kind of boring. No one's really going to go back and listen to it. So those are kind of the two streams. However, I do know of overseas, it's becoming more popular where you create something off air. I'm talking off-air radio style, and you package it together so well that you can actually play it on the radio which is kind of what I started doing with a few friends of mine through campus radio stations. So it was really, really awesome, and to learn and to grow from that was cool, and to kind of see what South Africa as a whole is doing with podcasting really sparked, maybe I should copy the American or the Western style, or should I try focus it more niched on South Africa, that kind of thing. So balancing podcasting within your life can be quite challenging. For me, I found it quite a challenging thing when I no longer had someone to rely on for editing my podcast. I no longer had someone I could bounce ideas off. It was kind of just me, a microphone, my laptop, and my headphones. And pretty much I had to kind of set up everything on my own, which, like I said, it was a struggle because it took a lot of time. And also, if you're not an editor, you got to teach yourself how to edit, especially if you don't have a friend who's willing to sit with you and teach you how to edit. YouTube tutorials come in handy, and that's pretty much how it goes. And that balance for me was probably the most difficult thing to do, because I hate editing audio. I love creating it, and I have these awesome ideas, and I can listen to pretty cool backtracks that I think will match the story or the interviews, but I don't like editing. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate. You get those podcast creators that are niched into editing, and that's when their creativity comes alive, and they can really make your podcast sound amazing. But for me, editing was, and it still is, a problem. So with my podcast Soul Search, I released it about a year ago. In fact, it was International Podcasting Day, I think, when I did drop my first episode. And Soul Search is a mental health podcast. So it aims to break stigmas around mental health. I know in South Africa and the rest of the world, there are still there's a huge stigma attached to depression, anxiety, that sort of thing. So it hasn't really gone away. And one thing that I've realized through studying psychology, and obviously I'm still busy with my honors degree, is that the one way we can kind of help the stigma kind of disintegrate or disappear is to educate. Because the more someone is aware of a particular topic, the less likely they are to stigmatize others against it. So my whole mission for Soul Search was to get as many people listening, and I'm sure that is the main goal for many podcasts out there, but not from to gain a money kind of a value to my podcast, but to get people listening, to get people talking, in order for these things to be spoken about, to break the stigma. So yes, I mean, like I said in the beginning, we would all love to make money off our podcasts. Right now, however, I feel that it's more important that I make it a passion project, and that I focus on what I wanted to start off in the beginning. However, don't get me wrong, I am going to be watching how to monetize your podcast later on. So I will be looking into those sorts of things. But like I said, for me, it was about getting the message out there. And the first 2 episodes I did, it took a long time to produce and to record and to get together. I thought I had an amazing, a really amazing person that I interviewed, who she went under an anonymous name or pseudonym, and she really opened up about her story. And for me, it was quite touching to see the response that the podcast got afterwards, of just people engaging with it and stating, oh yes, no, they've suffered with this, or they haven't suffered with this, or they know someone who has, or parents that listen to my podcast and now had a bit more of an understanding of how to deal with their children who are going through difficult times. That for me was quite an eye-opener. So the first 2 episodes that I did was on the same topic. It was self-harm and the reasons behind it and why it is done, etc., etc., etc. So a very touchy, triggering topic. So I think the most important thing for me from the psychological point of view would be, yes, we need to talk about these issues, but we also need to understand that those people that are perhaps not in the situation that they feel comfortable talking about the issues yet, that they actually still feel comfortable, that they know that this podcast can actually help them. So hence, I got together with a South African helpline called SADAG, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, where it's a toll-free helpline. You can call them up, and if you are in need, it kind of works as like a suicide hotline, but not only that. It's for a bit of moral support and that sort of thing. So they were really open to the fact that I would just be kind of advertising them in a way on my podcast, especially in the beginning. At the beginning, it may be triggering. Please keep this in mind. And then giving their number and their website and how to contact them. And I did that in the middle of the podcast and at the end. So I kind of, in a sense, followed the traditional advertising thing, I guess you could say, when you think of podcasting. I always think, and this is just from what I've heard from fellow podcasters, is that the intro, the ads, or the advertising with the introduction is kind of there, and then you get the advertising in the middle of the podcast, which usually should be more expensive, and then advertising at the end of the podcast. So I decided to use SADAG's helpline throughout my podcast. Also, kind of, like I said, using that advertising know-how and actually advertising something that obviously wasn't paying me to do so, but I felt it was necessary within my podcast. So that was another thing. I had to go through meetings with them, make sure if they were okay with it. And naturally they were very open to the idea. And I can actually recommend, if you are going to start a podcast, where you can use a nonprofit organization. And when I say use a nonprofit organization, I use them in the sense that I really wanted to put their helpline out there, their website out there. But they actually gave me so much more. They said, well, because you're doing this for us, we will be open to interviews. And if you need certain professionals you need to talk to for the podcast, we'll be open to that. So it was really helpful from that standpoint. So I'll recommend to you, if you are currently doing a podcast at the moment or producing your own podcast where there is a nonprofit that can help you gain that kind of information, then definitely go for it. Contact them. And obviously don't ask a nonprofit for money. They're not going to like that. And that's not the mindset you should be going into. But definitely for content, it'll take that load off your shoulders. So for the first episodes, I had obviously someone telling me their story, and it ended up being 2 half-an-hour episodes because it was quite a long story. I think altogether we just spoke, and I got, it must have been about an hour worth of audio. It must have been about an hour worth of audio that I had to sift through, which was quite difficult, I'll have you say, especially when it came to editing. And obviously I edited that whole thing by myself. So trying to find what was important, what was not important. Do I cut out the ums? Do I leave them in? So that for me was quite a difficult thing to do because I hadn't really been editing audio beforehand. So in balancing that, I think was the most difficult thing, is to realize that firstly, if you do have someone editing your podcasts, thank them. Even if you are paying them for what they are doing, audio engineers and editors, they deserve the biggest thumbs up. Really, really, they do. Because the amount of stuff that they probably have to sift through is a lot. And obviously you don't maybe realize it so much when you're the one recording the interview and such, like I did. I kind of just spoke and then realized, oh, but we're repeating ourselves here. Let me edit this out. Let me do this. So yeah, And also, if you have a friend who's willing to help and edit your podcasts, do take them up on the offer, but also try and encourage them to educate you. Because I can definitely say that if you educate yourself on how to edit your own podcast, yes, it will take a while and you'll have to have lots of patience. But once you have that skill, you'll be able to have a bit more freedom when it comes to the production and the production style of your podcasts. And often, as a host or as the content creator, you go in there with this idea of what you want your podcast to sound like. Yet, sometimes when it comes to sitting with an editor, you can't quite explain. So if you have that skill for yourself, then that'll just work a lot better. Obviously, though, if I could employ my own audio engineer, I totally would. I really, really would. And I think that is what actually I struggle with the most when it comes to balancing the podcast into my busy life is the editing. It's not the recording. It's not the setting up the interviews. It's not finding the background music. It's literally the editing, which is the most work. So once you can get that done, I think it'll work a lot better. So being on your own and trying to do a podcast by yourself is extremely daunting. Like I said, you've got to content create, so you have to come up with ideas and have a topic and run with it. And what I've started doing is I carry around a notebook. I kind of make it's bullet journaling, I think it's called, where you kind of just make to-do lists or jot down ideas. And I do that quite a lot as a teacher as well. You know, things I need to do, kids I need to talk to, parents I need to phone, books I need to mark, and here's a podcast idea. So things like that is, I find bullet journaling really, really helpful. So if you are a podcaster, or you're someone who wants to start a podcast, or you're stuck, because it can happen, where you just don't know what your next topic is going to be about, carry around a journal. I know a lot of people use their phones. If that works for you, fantastic. You'll probably save a lot of paper in the end. But yeah, for me, I like pen to paper, and I'll just scribble down a few things. And then once that's done, I put together mini to-do lists. So in order to get that topic going, I need to interview this person, or I need to look for this type of person, etc., etc., etc. So that has helped me with balancing my podcast. Also, don't be afraid to interview or have an audio archive of things that you don't think you're going to use. So, for example, there's lots of audio that I actually have for my podcast, or was meant to be for my podcast, or an episode that I later didn't develop. Trust me, those months when things get tough, or those months when you cannot get out to do an interview, you're actually going to want to rely on those pieces of audio. And once you listen to it again, you might have a fresh idea. You might be listening to it with fresh ears, I guess you could say. So, yeah, keep that audio. Never delete audio, especially raw audio. I know it's such a pain to go through and edit if you are going to do that again. However, I would recommend that you keep all the raw audio that you had. So getting back into podcasting. So this past year, I took a bit of a sabbatical, if you could say. I had a lot of personal things I needed to get through. I had a hectic life, which is a South African word that means absolutely crazy. I started a brand new job, which took more of my time. I'm finishing my last year of my honors degree, which obviously took a lot of time as well. Hopefully I'll finish that at the end of the year. So podcasting for me kind of took a back step. But if you are a creative and podcasting is your passion, you're not going to feel fully content until you get your next episode out, or until you're working on something, or until you have an idea for another episode or a product to release. So what helped me in those times where I knew I just didn't have the time to sit and edit was to set up interviews. So now that I do have time, well, I've got more time now to sit and edit, I can actually go through that and start writing scripts. So because it's kind of well produced, my voice kind of hosts the podcast. So I've been working on a lot of scripts, what to say after this interview, after this segment, how do we run from that to that. So I've been writing scripts at the moment for a few, and then obviously recording your own voice and editing it through that. So I can definitely recommend, if you are struggling, if you cannot find the time, take an hour, take a notebook and just jot down some ideas. You'll feel better for doing it. Like I said, if you are creative, if you are passionate about podcasting, you're definitely going to need that in your life. Another thing I'd recommend is listen to podcasts. Definitely listen to podcasts that you are interested in. They'll also help you spark your ideas for your podcasts. And another thing you could potentially do is kind of search topics that you want to discuss on your podcast. See if other people have done it. If they have done it, how have they done it? Did they cover the whole topic? Perhaps you can maybe contact them and learn from them, or perhaps even do a collab podcast. I mean, that would be pretty cool, I guess. So there's lots of things that you can do. I listen to podcasts a lot. In South Africa, radio is still the number one medium listened to, purely due to the fact that data here is expensive. Not everyone has access to Wi-Fi, and radio is free, especially if you are listening from an FM, AM radio frequency. It is free. So a lot of people still get their entertainment from that. However, in my car, driving to work, on my daily commutes, I listen to podcasts. When I am marking and grading tests or planning lessons, studying, I listen to podcasts. When I'm falling to sleep, I listen to podcasts. So I'm always listening to things. And I find that kind of inspires me. I don't know if you can agree with me, but it definitely will inspire me to kind of go, ooh, it's been a while. I should probably get back on that podcasting train. I should probably go and open my laptop and look at that abundance of audio that I have and work on it. So, yeah, for me, podcasting definitely helps me stay balanced, in the sense that it reminds me the love that I have for audio creation and that sort of thing. I mean, obviously, I know I'm never going to be those top grossing podcasts, although it would be nice, I guess, to get my message out there and such. But I don't think I could ever, for example, I know the Australian newspaper, they have some amazing podcasts out there. I don't think I could produce an investigative podcast on the same level just because I don't have the manpower. And I think that is what stops a lot of us, is we don't have the manpower to do so. Yes, you can start just using your phone and just recording interviews or vox pops with people. However, when it comes to actually setting up interviews, doing a bit of investigation, it becomes a little bit more difficult than that. But yeah, I think podcasting in South Africa is going to become more and more popular. I think before podcasting, there was this huge wave of internet radio with Cliff Central and the like, who started. The problem with internet radio, in my opinion, is, again, it's for the now. And why should I listen to or pay for data to listen to an online radio station in the now in my car, when I can just tune into an actual radio station that's not going to cost me much? I guess there could be many reasons for it, but in my opinion, I'd rather listen to a podcast, something niche, something that I want to listen to, something that entertains me, educates me, which is kind of what I like to do just before I fall asleep. Put a timer on a podcast, or, wait until the episode ends. Listen to podcasts that give you those quick facts, like no such thing as a fish, stuff you should know. Those types of things. I really, really enjoy them. It's kind of just an afterthought before you go to bed. I like it. I think those are the types of podcasts that can kind of break away from your busy life. So in creating that balance, like I said, you need to make time. You need to be prepared to make that time as well. Sometimes, and I'm sure we can all relate to it, when we know we have to get an episode out, or when we know we want to get an episode out, there's like a new season of Stranger Things on Netflix that you have to watch first, that kind of thing. And that's the pressure that I feel when I'm working on my own, is due to the fact that obviously I don't have a team pushing me. I don't have, it's like I said, it's not my income. I don't rely on it for income. I don't have that pushing me. So what is pushing me? I got to push myself. So that's the most difficult thing. I'm still trying to find that drive, I guess you could say, because I love podcasting. And whenever I put out a new episode, I get that really great feeling that I've accomplished something, or like, because it's my podcast, I'm making a difference. Because it's this mental health podcast and people are going to talk about it, I am making this difference. However, it's just getting over it, once you've had a full day of work and you get home and you got to study, and then you think, ooh, podcasting, I should probably record that script, or I should probably record that intro. That is the most difficult thing for me, I think. Another interesting thing I think in South Africa is a lot of people don't really know what a podcast is. I say that with a pinch of salt, because I know there's lots of South Africans that are going to come back and say, we all know what a podcast is. We don't. If I mention to family or friends, oh no, I'm at home, I'm recording for a podcast, or, I've got this to do, that to do. What's a podcast? So I think a lot of it is still there. There's this, I don't want to call it I don't want to say that we're uneducated when it comes to podcasting, but I think because there hasn't been a huge South African push into podcasting, we aren't always aware of it. Even music streaming took a while to take off here, and slowly but surely, everyone now has Spotify and Apple Music and the like. So that sort of thing. But we're getting there. We're getting there. There's an amazing podcasting community in, I know, Joburg and Cape Town, who they host pod meets, which is pretty cool. It's Elna, this lovely, lovely lady who hosts them. And she's actually from the Wits Radio Academy. So what she does is, she was from the Wits Radio Academy. So that's another campus station. And she's got this amazing love for podcasts, and she's always looking for South African podcasters. So these pod meets are pretty cool. Basically, it's a group of South African podcasters that just meet up and talk about all things podcasting, literally anything. If they have a podcast, if they're interested in podcasting, or perhaps they just listen to overseas podcasts and want to hear what everyone else is listening to. It's pretty interesting to see who is actually interested and what you can kind of take away from that as well. And obviously, it's a good marketing tool as well if you are planning on I guess you can say, selling your podcast to a certain extent. It's a great way to get your podcast name out there. So like I said, we have an amazing community, although it is small. We have some diehard podcasters in South Africa. There's a small little Facebook group called All Things Podcasting. It's hosted by this awesome guy called Brad Brown. He runs these amazing podcasts, and he's doing so well for himself. As a South African podcaster, he's doing extremely well. And he focuses a lot on sports type podcasts. So, for example, I know he did one on the triathlon and that sort of thing. And those are extremely popular worldwide. So I think if you are from a smaller country where you cannot always rely on your niche markets here, and if you really want to make a big name for yourself, perhaps pick a podcast stream or topic that can be worldwide, even though your focus could be your country to begin with. So that's what I've noticed a trend here in South African podcasting. And obviously to the podcasts that I listen to that are kind of based in the Western world and such, is it's something I can still relate to. However, I'm not in the same country as them. So that sort of thing. Yeah, balancing podcasting is a difficult thing. It really, really is. And I guess I could say I'm envious of those people who can call it their career. But in the same breath, I think if my passion project would be my only thing that I'm, gaining an income from, I'd feel extremely critical of myself. And that's the next part, is don't become too critical. When it comes to balancing a podcast within your daily life, if you are overcritical of yourself, you're not really going to get a lot of the work done. I know this because I'm obviously extremely guilty of it, in the sense that I'll re-record and re-record and re-record myself saying the same thing over and over and over again. And it doesn't change, but perhaps the third take, I'll feel a bit more confident and I'll say, okay, I'll use that. And that obviously also takes up a lot of time. So I think if you are able to get some kind of voice training, not even voice training, perhaps just listening to other podcasts and what they sound like and how people express themselves, you can kind of follow that niche market into how you should sound. So I'd recommend that you would do that in order to save a bit of time and not be so harsh on yourself, especially if you are doing it on your own. I didn't set dates and times and that kind of thing of when my next episodes were to drop. And looking back, I think perhaps I should have, because it would have kept me motivated to release on a particular day and time. However, I think I would have grown to resent it. I don't know if you can relate to that, but if you are constantly pressured for a date and a time that you need to drop the next episode, and it's just you, meaning you're doing the editing, you're doing the content creating, you're doing pretty much everything, it's gonna make you want to fall back and hold back, and you're gonna start hating it. You're gonna look at it more like a job, or a boring job, I guess you could say, something that you don't want to do. So yeah, that definitely, don't maybe set a time and a date when your next episode should be out, unless of course you need to, unless of course you're a team and you're able to do that, unless of course it is your main stream of income, then obviously. And if you have a wide, a large audience, if you have a large fan base, a large audience, obviously they're going to want to know, when is the next episode coming out? When can I listen to your next season of your podcast or whatnot? So then you've kind of got something to push for. However, I think if you are starting out podcasting like I am, take it slow, take it easy, teach yourself. I think that is the best bit of advice I can give to you when it comes to balancing a podcast, is teach yourself first, learn from your mistakes, release the episode, and grow from there. I really don't like releasing things I'm not 100% happy with, which is very difficult to do, and that falls back into being overly critical. Because there have been times where I've had episodes ready to go and then held back and said, no, I don't like the way this sounds. I don't like the way that sounds. I don't like what that professional said. I need to get a second opinion. Obviously, because yes, it is a mental health podcast that I do produce, and I am studying my degree in psychology. I'm not a professional. So at the end of the day, I can't sit there and give advice to people. I need to find those professionals. And that can sometimes also be quite challenging. And I'm extremely critical of, have I found the right person? Perhaps I should go back. Perhaps I should include that part, but also get a second opinion. I guess like you would if you're going to a doctor or whatnot. So yeah, being overly critical, I guess, can be a good thing, but it can take away from that time that you have, that valuable time that you are using to create your podcast. And procrastination, I mentioned Netflix earlier. Procrastination is probably one of the worst things you can do to yourself when you are a podcaster. However, you also have a full-time job, because you kind of just want to come home after a long day at work and sit in front of the TV and watch, like I said, that new season of Stranger Things, just because, that was a really good season. Um, and you kind of got to like mask yourself. You got to double check yourself, because when you wake up the next morning, you're going to feel guilty. You're going to feel, oh, I didn't do my things that I was meaning to do. I didn't edit that piece of audio. I didn't set up that interview. Perhaps I should. And and I think once you make a to-do list or a balance list of your podcast and things that you need to do, that things will definitely fall into place. And these are kind of things that I've learned, I'd say, in the last year working on my podcast on my own. It has been a difficult journey, and I'm coming back in full swing as much as I can. Again, I've got things that are coming into my life that I have no control over, like we all do. So that balance is it's important to have, and definitely have that archive of audio, of interviews that you can edit, that you are prepared to perhaps upload an episode here or there, and that you can do. And like I said, if you are a creative, if you are thriving on audio creation, if it's kind of a passion of yours, then it won't be that difficult to do. In fact, it should be something you look forward to doing. And I definitely do look forward to doing that. It's kind of an outlet for me, perhaps not the editing so much, but writing the scripts. And when everything just sounds good, and okay, I guess editing does fall into play, but when you get that backtrack, and it matches that interview perfectly, and just the emotion that you can hear through that's pretty much the best feeling ever for me in any case. So if you have that passion, if you have that creative drive, I think that's something that you should thrive to stick to and not lose. Another thing that I struggle with is, I guess, getting the podcast out there. Obviously, we have social media platforms, and you should obviously have a separate page for your, if you have a podcasting network or a podcast itself, you should have like a separate, a Facebook page, a Twitter. You should also have an Instagram. And I struggle with trying to keep all of those active all the time. I'm not very good when it comes to social media. There'll be days where I just don't really want to type anything else. And then I think, oh, perhaps I should check my podcasting social media and see if anyone said anything. So that I find quite difficult, is managing the social media, because obviously you don't have a social media manager, you don't have and that sort of thing. Another thing is your website. So I would recommend that you get a website, just personally, because people are going to take you more seriously. And when I mean people that you interview. Your mom's always going to love you, regardless of what you do. But people will take you more seriously. And like I said, when I went to the nonprofit and I asked them, can I please use your helpline as part of my mental health podcast in case people feel the need to call? They were open to the fact. They actually said, do you have a website? Where can we find it? And luckily enough, I had a website. I had an email address as well, professional email address. And I was able to set all of that up. But when you are starting out, I would focus on the actual creation of the podcast, because once you start with that, the rest will follow. Then hosting platforms. In South Africa, we don't have a large variety of hosting platforms, which caused a lot of stress, because I was YouTubing and Googling and doing all of these things. Where do I find a platform that I can post my podcast on that won't cost me so much money? Because again, passion project. And it'll put it on all the podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and all the other Android ones as well. And luckily here we have Iono FM, and they actually really, really helped me with all of that. I can't believe how easy it was, to be honest. And I think the fact that they are a South African company makes it so much easier, because if I am struggling, if I cannot upload, if there's a question that I have, I can always just phone them up and they will answer and give me advice or help that I need right there and then. I guess you can use Iono FM as a hosting site if you are not in South Africa. I've only had good experiences with it. However, I think if you find something that is particularly based in your country that works well, then stick to that. But yeah, I'm really, really happy with my hosting site. So I think that would be number one. Get your hosting site, get your content, get your audio, edit the audio, get your social media going. Perhaps your website can come in before that, or kind of enjoin in connection with the hosting site, I'd say. And then, yeah, be a creative. Do your thing. Balance your podcast throughout your life without having a breakdown. And I say that with the utmost respect. Sometimes podcasting, although it is a passion project, although it is so much fun to do, especially when you know you are talking about something that you're passionate about and making a difference and such, it can still be stressful. It can be the reason you don't sleep. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, especially if you don't know how to edit audio, which is my biggest thing. I don't know how to edit audio. However, I am teaching myself. I've got a few friends that have been teaching me as well. And another thing I can recommend is, once you find an audio editing platform that works for you or that you know a little bit about, stick to it. Even if your friends or someone else tells you, oh, but this one is easier, oh, but that one is easier. Fair, that's fine. But remember, it's you. You need to edit it. You need to stick to it. So stick to what you know. Stick to something you don't need to reteach yourself, because that's just going to cause more stress. I did that. I decided to go away from Logic Pro and into a different audio editing software. It didn't work out for me, just because I was used to Logic Pro's ways and means and that kind of thing. So that was quite difficult for me. And don't be ashamed. If you haven't gotten an episode out in a few months, you're human. And like I said, if you don't have a huge fan base, or a large audience, I guess I can say, and if you are doing this for a passion project, that should be your number one goal, is to get that audio out there, but on your terms, when you think it's ready. Be critical, don't be too critical, and that sort of thing. So that's all I really have to say on balancing podcasting within your own life, and just things that I've learned from the past year, things that I've really struggled with, and things that I've learned. Yeah, like I said, I have quite a busy lifestyle in being a teacher, in being a student as well. So podcasting sometimes for me is my Netflix, if that makes sense. It is the thing that makes me relax and de-stress. And I think if you reach that point, then I think you're in the right place. Yeah, so Dave, I don't know, are there any questions I can answer? Or I'm quite happy to talk about podcasting in South Africa on a general.
Yeah, let me quickly run through the chat room. Awesome
Okay.
work. I love just hearing about your story, the background, how you've really balanced between becoming an educator, going to school, podcasting. I think there's so many people that either are podcasters right now, or they're considering getting into the space as far as producing and being a content creator, that these are all things they need to know about. You know, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of resource and dedication to make that happen. So let me see if there's anything in here. Just a lot of positive comments. So the state of podcasting in South Africa right now, you got about like 3 minutes here. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
So I think there is more that can be done. I think when it comes to education, definitely in South Africa, there's been a history of tertiary education suffering, and obviously a large population of South Africans are uneducated. And I think one way that we can, I guess, help that in a way, yeah, this is my educator brain also talking, is to get people releasing podcasts that can not only entertain but educate as well. So, especially South African podcasts. So, I know that there are lots of native languages in South Africa. I know there's a Zulu podcast that was made years ago that is still up on Apple Podcasts that people still to this day listen to in order to teach themselves Zulu. So, I mean, if you are thinking, if you are a South African right now, well, if you are South African and thinking of starting a podcast, perhaps niche it a bit more to the education side. I know that a lot of students I teach, they're quite aware of podcasts. You know, I guess younger generations are, and they often ask, "Oh, can we? Is there a podcast that has to do with English literature, but South African English literature, or is there a podcast that I can listen to that'll help me with South African history and that sort of thing?" So I definitely think in South Africa there is a focus, and that could be a particular niched focus. That if you are looking to start a podcast, that could be it. And then podcasting in South Africa, I did mention that there's a lot of radio archiving, audio archiving that happens that kind of floods the, if I can say, floods the South African podcasting networks. I mentioned earlier about how traffic you hear on the radio is then audio archived into a podcast and played, and it's left there. So you can go back and listen to the traffic, which I think is not the best use for a podcast. But having said that, I think if you are in the space where you are perhaps a radio presenter, or you work in radio and you have the means to create something that can be long lasting, informative, educational, entertaining, even audio, then you should definitely go and start with that. And like I said, with the education, so if you are planning to look at a podcast that entertains and educates, it would be extremely popular. I know in South Africa, of course, if it has South African themes, but I know worldwide as well. So if you are thinking of starting a podcast, perhaps think about how can I entertain yet educate at the same time, if that does make sense. I'm seeing a lot of people who are starting podcasts. I don't know if this is around the world as well, but mainly in South Africa, they'll start a podcast and it will just be the person talking to their friend about their day or about their life. And it can be entertaining. However, if you do not have a name for yourself, meaning if you weren't on a radio station or no one really knows you, who's actually going to listen to that kind of podcast? It's mainly going to be your friends and your mom, if you're lucky. So basically, like I'd say, kind of niche a little bit, but also have that that creative drive and that passion behind it.
Tayla, I can't thank you enough for joining us this year and representing everything that you're doing over there in South Africa. And again, it was great little tips and tricks. I can't wait to share this with our International Podcast Day community after over on our YouTube channels when this is up and posted. So before we head out, let everybody know specifically where they can go to get in touch with you.
So I have an email address, help@soulsearch.co.za. I also have an Instagram account for my podcast called, it's @soulsearchza, and then Twitter, again, soulsearchza. Alternatively, you can also get me on Twitter. It's just Tayla Welch, @Tayla Welch.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tayla, for taking the time to volunteer and talk about balancing podcasting into your life. So, everybody, continue to use the hashtag International Podcast Day and continue to celebrate the international podcasts. And we will see you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.